What if episode 8 of the Testaments just revealed the real horror of Gilead? Not the violence, not the punishments, not even the public executions, but the way the system slowly convinces young girls that suffering is normal. Because this episode is brutal in a very different way. It's quieter, more emotional, more psychological, and honestly, that's what makes it so disturbing. By the end of episode 8, almost every major character is trapped in some kind of emotional prison. Agnes is heartbroken, Daisy is terrified, Shu is drowning under family pressure, Huldo is silenced, and even Garth suddenly feels far more complicated than we originally thought. This wasn't an episode about action. It was an episode about pressure. And the terrifying thing is, pressure changes people. Let's break it all down. Episode 8 begins with Agnes completely shattered emotionally after learning that Becka is officially marrying Garth. And the show does a really good job portraying how complicated the situation is for her. Because Agnes isn't angry at Becka. That's what makes it hurt more. If Becka had betrayed her, maybe Agnes could turn that pain into rage. Maybe she could hate someone. Maybe she could make sense of it emotionally. But she can't, because Becka is trapped too. Just like her. And that's one of the biggest themes of this entire episode. Nobody really gets to choose their life in Gilead. Not the girls. Not the wives. Not even some of the men. Everyone is being pushed into roles they never truly chose for themselves. And while Agnes is trying to emotionally process losing Garth, Gilead immediately forces her into her next role. She's matched with Commander Weston. And the symbolism surrounding this engagement is honestly chilling. As part of the ceremony, Agnes has to reassemble a smashed plate. Now on paper, this sounds harmless, but the meaning behind it is horrifying. The broken plate represents the girls themselves. Broken in, reshaped, made obedient, exactly the way Gilead believes women should be. And the scariest part? Everyone around Agnes treats this like it's beautiful, like it's sacred, like being emotionally destroyed is somehow holy. And that's what makes Gilead so terrifying. It doesn't just control people physically. It teaches them to romanticize their own suffering. Now, meanwhile at school, we get one of the most awkward and revealing sequences of the episode. The girls are separated for copulation class, which honestly tells you everything you need to know about Gilead's understanding of intimacy. Aunt Vidala barely explains anything. She gives the girls a vague overview and then basically says, "Your husbands will handle the rest." That's it. No emotional preparation. No understanding. No education. Because in Gilead, sex isn't treated as connection. It's treated as duty. And these girls are expected to enter marriage completely uninformed and emotionally unequipped. But while all this is happening, Daisy suddenly finds herself in a terrifying situation. She gets her period. And because she's undercover inside Gilead, this changes everything. Now the show doesn't need dramatic music or giant action scenes to make this tense. Because the danger here is completely psychological. Daisy is dressed in white. She has no real access to proper supplies. She's already hiding her identity. And now she has to conceal physical evidence that could completely alter her future. Because once Gilead sees her as fertile, her value changes instantly. And honestly, Daisy's panic in these scenes feels incredibly realistic. Not because she's screaming or falling apart, but because she's trying so hard not to panic. That's what makes it stressful. You can see her calculating every movement, every stain, every interaction, every second. Thankfully, Shu covers for her. And this leads to one of the most unexpectedly emotional dynamics in the episode. Because Shu finally opens up about what she's been going through. And suddenly, one of the quietest characters in the show becomes one of the saddest. Shu reveals that she's been pressured constantly by her parents because she still hasn't gotten her period, which completely changes the way we understand her character. Earlier in the season, Shu's obsession with growing up faster almost felt childish. But now, it feels tragic, because she's been taught that her worth depends entirely on becoming a wife and eventually a mother. And the pressure becomes even heavier once we learn her little brother was on Angel's flight. That detail is huge. Her family already carries emotional scars from losing a child connected to Gilead's chaos. So now all that pressure has been transferred onto Shu. She's expected to continue the family line, to restore stability, to succeed where others failed. That's an unbearable amount of pressure for someone so young. And then the episode gives us this strangely sweet moment between Shu and Daisy. Daisy tries explaining sex to her, but because Shu has been raised inside Gilead's rigid ideology, Daisy's descriptions sound almost fictional to her. Like fantasy, like something from another universe. And honestly, that moment says everything about Gilead. They haven't just controlled information, they've controlled imagination. Now while Daisy and Shu are dealing with their own struggles, Agnes begins noticing something deeply wrong with Hulda. She's withdrawn, fearful, different, and eventually Agnes learns the horrifying truth. Dr. Grove abused Hulda too. This revelation changes everything for Agnes, because now she realizes her own experience wasn't isolated. It's systemic. And suddenly, all those quiet fears become horrifyingly real. Agnes encourages Hulda to tell the aunts, to speak up, to report him. But Hulda hesitates. And honestly, you completely understand why. Because in Gilead, victims are often treated like damaged property. If Hulda speaks out, she risks ruining her marriage prospects forever.
Which is horrifying.
The system punishes the abused more than the abuser. All those quiet fears become horrifyingly real. Agnes encourages Hulda to tell the aunts, to speak up, to report him. But Hulda hesitates. And honestly, you completely understand why. Because in Gilead, victims are often treated like damaged property. If Hulda speaks out, she risks ruining her marriage prospects forever.
Which is horrifying.
The system punishes the abused more than the abuser. And this is where episode 8 takes Agnes into morally dangerous territory. Because instead of protecting Hulda, she accidentally helps silence her. Things only become more emotionally complicated after Agnes returns home. Even though Becka invites her to the engagement party, Agnes can barely function emotionally. She's distant, cold, completely disconnected from everything happening around her. And honestly, who could blame her? She's being forced to celebrate losing the person she loves. What's fascinating, though, is Commander Weston. Because surprisingly, he's kind to her. At least for now. He stands up for Agnes against Paula. He tells her he wants the engagement process to be enjoyable for her too. And that creates a very unsettling dynamic. Because the show is forcing us to question whether Weston is genuinely compassionate or simply better at hiding his control. And honestly, that uncertainty makes him scarier. Because obvious villains are easy to recognize. Polite ones aren't. Back at school, Aunt Vidala calls Agnes into her office. Hulda is there too. And we immediately know where this is going. The abuse has officially become a misunderstanding.
Just like that.
Covered up.
Buried.
Silenced. And this scene is devastating because it perfectly captures how authoritarian systems protect themselves. Not through truth, but through preservation. The goal isn't justice. The goal is stability. Afterward, Agnes reassures Hulda that she'll still have a good life. But the sadness in this moment is overwhelming because Agnes herself doesn't fully believe those words anymore. She's trying to comfort Hulda while slowly realizing how broken this entire world really is. Meanwhile, Becca's engagement party reveals another fascinating detail about Garth's family. His father was apparently instrumental in keeping Boston under Gilead's control. That's massive, because it means Garth isn't just connected to the system. His family helped build it. And then we learn something even more interesting. His father was poisoned, possibly by Mayday. And suddenly, Garth's loyalties become way more complicated than we thought. Because now we have to ask, is Garth truly committed to the resistance? Or is he only partially involved? Remember, his family depends heavily on Gilead. Status,
housing,
protection. Everything they have exists because of the regime. So, if things escalate, could Garth hesitate? Could he struggle choosing between survival and rebellion? The show seems to be planting seeds for exactly that conflict. Now one of the most disturbing conversations in the episode happens between Agnes and her father. He openly admits the girls are too young for marriage. He knows it, but then he justifies it by talking about declining birth rates and science. And this moment perfectly captures how Gilead disguises cruelty as necessity. Everything becomes justified if survival is involved. Even child marriage, even forced obedience, even trauma. To make matters worse, Paula is already trying to secure a handmaid for Agnes and Weston's future household. And honestly, that detail is horrifying because Agnes herself is barely still a child. Yet the system is already preparing another woman to eventually be enslaved beneath her. That's how Gilead sustains itself. It turns victims into participants. Outside, Daisy finally breaks emotionally with Garth. She begs him to get her out.
Because she knows the clock is ticking now.
Her period changes everything. Sooner or later someone will notice. Sooner or later questions will come. And Daisy is terrified. But Garth can't help her. Or maybe he won't. Because he reveals something important. He has a handler too. Meaning even he isn't fully in control of his own life. And again, the show reinforces the same theme. Everyone in Gilead answers to someone. But the emotional climax of the episode belongs entirely to Agnes and Daisy. And honestly, it's heartbreaking. Agnes can barely stand being inside Becca's house anymore because Dr. Grove is there watching the girls. And finally, Agnes makes a bold choice. She goes to Aunt Lydia and tells her about the abuse. Now, Lydia's response is fascinating. She promises Grove will be dealt with. But she also tells Agnes to stay quiet for now. And this is classic Lydia. Practical.
Strategic. Cold.
She recognizes the corruption, but still protects the system first. Later, Agnes finally opens up fully to Daisy about what happened to her. And this scene is incredibly emotional because Daisy immediately reacts with pure rage. Not judgment. Not discomfort.
Rage.
Because unlike many people inside Gilead, Daisy still remembers what normal morality looks like. She understands how monstrous this system really is. And despite all the tension and secrecy between them, she hugs Agnes. Both of them crying. Both trapped. Both carrying pain they never asked for. And honestly, that moment may be the emotional heart of the entire episode. Because for a brief second, the walls of Gilead disappear. And all that's left are two scared girls trying to survive. Now, overall, I do think episode 8 has some pacing problems. A lot of these recent episodes feel slower than they probably should. Outside of the Aunt Lydia episode, the season occasionally feels like it's delaying bigger developments instead of driving toward them. But at the same time, the emotional character work here is really strong, especially for Agnes, because she's changing rapidly, and not always for the better. She's becoming colder. More conflicted, more willing to compromise morally. And that villain mode energy the episode hints at? That's fascinating. Because trauma changes people. And Gilead specializes in trauma. By the end of episode 8, one thing becomes painfully obvious. These girls are being forced to grow up far too fast inside a system designed to crush them emotionally before they ever truly become adults. And the scariest part? Some of them are beginning to adapt to it. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more of the Testament's recaps, theories, and episode analysis. Because with the season heading toward its conclusion, things inside Gilead are only going to get darker from here.